Everybody, and welcome to our first formal public accountability meeting since lockdown. We will be reinstating the update meetings sort of in between these monthly public accountability meetings, but given that my role is scrutiny and oversight, we felt that we needed to revert back to that once a month formal meeting now. So the first item on the agenda is attendance and apologies. We have, I think, apologies from Chief Executive to the OPFCC, Simon Dennis, and also Phil Kane, I think. So with those two apologies. In terms of the minutes of the meeting, there are really no minutes of the meeting because it's all available for people to view.
Julie, you're frozen, but I think the point being you can view any of these meetings on our website, so there are no minutes because anyone can view those meetings in full, and they are broken into sections as well for those that want to skip various bits and focus on certain things. Sorry, Julie, you look like you're back now.
Will, you were on mute for some of that. So am I back or not? No. Okay. I'm gonna hang up and I'm gonna come back in on the other device.
Okay. Okay. I don't think there's any reason to delay the start of the presentation. So I don't have the agenda in front of me, unfortunately, so I don't know if it's policing or fire first this month. But hopefully one of you guys know, so we can pass on to one of you, please.
Policing first, please.
You're on mute, Sam.
Yeah, you're on mute, Sam. Sam, you can start. We just can't hear you. Oh, the joys of Teams. This is going well this afternoon, isn't it?
Right, apologies. Yeah, I was on mute, but I couldn't take mute off at the same time as load. So hopefully my presentation is, if you could just give me a nod when it comes onto screen. Brilliant. I can see the chief nodding, so I'll take my cue from there. So thank you very much, Will, for introducing me. Superintendent Sam Miller. I've been asked to come along today and talk about our police and crime plan, and at this occasion we've got an opportunity to talk about our third priority in our police and crime plan, which is very much about what does reinforcing around the front line look like and our local policing. So I've got a short presentation to go through. Obviously, I'll take any interventions from anybody who's on the presentation if you want to add to it, and I'll just go from there. So reinforcing local policing within the police and crime plan for North Yorkshire really is driven by some key objectives that have been consistent and central to the plan for the last 12 months. And I think it's just important very briefly to have a quick reminder of those 5 objectives, because that's what I'm largely going to try and talk to North Yorkshire community about today, about what does their reinforcement of the local policing look like. So the first objective is very much about mobile workforce, having a very effective workforce that's technically enabled, that we're flexible, dynamic, and we've got a very much a learning approach towards how we use technology. Second objective is about how we plan and prepare for changes, future demand. I'll talk a little bit later, but policing is ever changing, and so that is a big requirement for us to keep up to date. Objective 3 then is about having a planned and coordinated, it's about having a planned and coordinated and collaborative approach to how we look at demand and how we're looking to reduce our demand and get very much more into prevention. it is about trying to identify who's at the most harm in our communities and put a real focus on that, and bring down crime and social behaviour, and certainly with a view to in the longer term. The fourth objective then is very much about making effective use of the whole policing family. We are fantastically enabled in North Yorkshire that we've got a chief who heads up that national portfolio. So again, I'll talk a little bit about what opportunities that's given us over the last 12 months. And then finally, objective 5 in this work stream is very much about what is the voice of our community? How are we engaged, and how are we talking to North Yorkshire public about what their police service should look like? So again, it's just a reminder of what the 5 objectives are that we're working to from the Police and Crime Plan. So I think it's really important to look at what's working well, and I think this is where we get a bit of an opportunity to talk about some of the progress we've made. I suppose it's really timely to talk about technology and the effective use of technology with COVID and the whole need to be much more digital and enabled. It's become really at the forefront. So our desire to become a very operational mobile workforce is never ending. And I've just put a few examples up there really about how we've been using technology to assist policing and delivery. So body-worn video is a really good example, which I just want to hover over for a minute. There is lots of research that shows that if body-worn video are used and used well, then they really change both the behaviours of the public and also of our police officers, and that's got to be a good thing for the interaction of the people in North Yorkshire. It does capture evidence at the scene, and often that really increases our chances of prosecutions. So again, in totality, we are seeing more prosecutions, better use of body-worn videos, which got to support victims of crime. So there's just one example of our use of technology to enable how we deliver our service to North Yorkshire. I've put in there a couple of really timely things. The use of remote working is another really good example. Internally, we've been using technology to keep in touch, and we're just about to try and introduce the capability to be able to deal a lot more significantly with the public online in terms of contacting them. Now, what that means, of course, is that even in a really restricted time like COVID, we are keeping contact. We're giving the public alternative options. What's fantastic about that, of course, is that it's probably what the public are going to come to expect from us. So we've got to be really on the front foot about how do you build practices like that into normal daily business. So the use of the digital capability for policing is really important. We've got, just to anybody listening in from the public, we've got a whole strand of work around how do you take the good practice from COVID and make it deliver a better police service for the public going forward, and that's work that's ongoing. Okay, I'm going to drop down now. What else is working well? Preparing for change in demand. In my 25 years of service, I would say policing never stands still. We are constantly looking about where the shift in demand, where threat comes from. So nobody would be surprised to know that really having a very alert intelligence process that allows us to understand drugs and drug running and supplying that comes into our county is at the top of our agenda at the moment. What I would say to the public, of course, is that what that means is that we are developing ways of making the most of the intelligence that comes in, and I think that they probably just need to be really reassured that that's at the top of our list. All our plans, all our horizon scanning about what's coming down the line for North Yorkshire and how we take our services to keep us safe is a priority for us. So preparing for change in demand is a really important piece of work for us. In terms of prevention and early intervention approach, then again, I want to touch on this. It's a particular strand of work that I'm heavily involved in, and I think it's really important for communities in North Yorkshire to know what's driving our sort of activity at the moment. We've got a huge focus at the moment on engagement, about understanding what the public and what our space need from us. We've got a focus on trying to work with our partnerships in our community hubs to try and unpick and get to the root cause of what's happening. So there's lots of internal work going on around developing our teams at a local level, with a focus to saying, you know, the investment that's coming, whether it's from local monies or whether it's a national driver, then we are very, very keen to put them in areas where they can have the biggest impact. And investing in local neighbourhood teams is absolutely the focus for North Yorkshire. Just in terms of looking at the whole family approach, then I've listed a few things there that come into this bar. As I say, our chief leads this as a national portfolio, so there is quite a heavy focus in North Yorkshire Police around citizens in policing. I've certainly recently been involved in making sure that all our special constables, as an example, had dedicated laptops and were able to function much more effectively as the police officers that they are when they're working with us. What this means, of course, for people and for anybody who is out in our communities is that our specials are much more effective about being able to see investigations through and about supporting their colleagues. What that gives us, of course, is more choice, and that's absolutely what we're after. As I say, I'll never apologise for exploiting the Chief's portfolio. It has given us an opportunity to be able to focus on what the roles of our citizens in police and our volunteers are. And we're very, very keen to use those roles to support the most vulnerable. So some really innovative work around how we're using volunteers to support some of our victims and some of our most vulnerable, and in particular around some of our really challenging mental health issues that we become absolutely involved in. So the whole family, the whole policing family is an important element, which I think we should be proud of and is working well in North Yorkshire. And then finally, you know, the most important is about empowering our communities, because we absolutely are here to deliver for the people of North Yorkshire, and being able to say that our communities have a voice is really important. And that's why really we've invested in our engagement officers. When we got an opportunity in the last 12 months to put additionality into frontline, they were straight onto local teams, where the emphasis is on community engagement. It is on about around problem solving, and it is very much about local messages that really reflect what's going on locally. We never fail either to try and use good practice elsewhere. So again, the Chief with her portfolio has been very quick to put us on to colleagues over in Humberside who've got some really fantastic practice being rolled out about how to communicate much more effectively that the public are doing, which really builds the intelligence and information picture for any police service. As I say, we will always look to use good practices from elsewhere, and that's exactly what we are doing too. So I'm just going to pause at that point before I move on to the next slide and just see if there's anything that anybody would like to say on top of it, or any questions at that stage. Okay.
Sam, I'd like to open that up actually, because we've had a lot of talking, so I think we just need to start.
Of course.
A little bit here, if we may.
Yeah.
So, can you just on the technology, how can you evidence the impact that that's actually having? So we spent a lot of money, for example, on body-worn video, and we get a lot of really positive feedback from officers, and we've had some really good outcomes in court cases and all the rest of it. But it was a very expensive investment, and there was a business case process that we went through. How have you realised the benefits of that business case, and how can you evidence that that's good value for money for the public?
I think there's a couple of things, Commissioner, I would say around the body worn is we know the research is there that tells us that it is a really beneficial tool in policing for the behaviours that I've talked about. That the important element, of course, is to track the impact that the body worn video is having, and that's something, the tracking of what we're using it, where we're using it, how we're using it, and how it's contributing to the outcomes, the criminal justice outcomes in particular, is part of the work that we've been doing with our Business Insight team. So providing the data that allows us to be held to account for the outcomes that the body worns is part of the performance meetings that our assistant chief constables take our commanders through to clearly see what are the outcomes that we're getting for the body worn videos. Now we are still in that early tracking phase. I think that we are just about to get to a point where we have got body worn videos in all our stations available for all our staff who obviously take it out. So the rolling out of the body worn was the first phase. Now the tracking and an understanding of the outcomes that it's having on some of our performance measures is what we're doing now. That's been developed, as I say, by the Business Insight team. The dashboards are how we look at that data and hold the commanders to account for the outcomes it's having.
So it's my understanding that we will be going through a procurement of that technology within the foreseeable future. How are we using the data that you've gathered from the first tranche of body worn to inform that re-procurement of technology as we go forward? Because that will be another area of expenditure.
So, Commissioner, I can see the Chief's got a hand up. Chief, are you wanting to?
So I'm sorry,
right.
I can't see hands up.
That's okay. Well, I'll yep. So
somebody can let me know.
Okay, Chief.
Thank you, Sam. And I think it would assist from a wider organisational perspective. So, yes, that's absolutely right. Nationally, the kit and equipment for body worn video has been around for quite some time now. North Yorkshire were one of the last forces to adopt the body worn video, which of course comes with, I suppose, the disbenefit of the lifetime of that kit and equipment has moved on significantly since the first forces implemented it, and therefore it is due for renewal because better kit, more reliable, better technology has come along during that period of time, and therefore there is a re-provision of body worn video nationally to take on board those improvements. So some of the performance data that Sam has just mentioned, so I know we've got professional standards data that shows investigations into complaints against police officers and PCSOs and some of our staff has been able to be progressed much more quickly and be resolved much more quickly. So there's been reduced costs, there's been reduced sickness, because sometimes obviously people become very distressed if there are lengthy investigations, and of course delivering that all important service to the public and transparency when a complaint is made that the police have been involved in has really assisted for those investigations to be resolved more quickly for the benefit of the public and the well-being and welfare of our staff and officers. There's also data being gathered from a criminal justice process perspective. So that data relates to people who can be shown body worn video during police interviews, for example, and that might have led to a lengthy trial date in the future for somebody to go to a not guilty trial, whereas now they can see the evidence. There are more guilty pleas and therefore swift justice because the evidence is there in video footage there and then during the initial interview, the day that the person is arrested, rather than months and months of file preparation and court time taken up with these cases. So all of that data is being captured through the business insights and performance data work, and I would wholly expect that data to be presented as the evidence base for the case against the money being spent on future equipment.
Yeah, because so I think so that's what's really important, because obviously different types of policing teams might have different requirements as well. So it's understanding the nuances of that. So we spend as much as is necessary, but not more than that is necessary. and we've learnt a lot over the last 2-3 years around all of this, and it's capturing that learning to make sure that we move forward. Just from a technology point of view, how much better is the new generation kit?
So I think the best way I can describe it for the public of North Yorkshire is people generally change their mobile phones every 2 years because the technology is outdated. You then get a system where when you try and update your iOS on your phone in order to download the latest app, you can't do it because your phone hasn't got the technology within it to download the latest version of something. So the new kit and equipment, as I understand it, although I'm not a technical expert on body-worn video, is the way in which we download the material, and the bandwidth it takes up to download that material and the storage requirements have all been massively improved as a result of the benefits of so there are savings in the back office as well as the kit itself being more up to speed that can assist us in processing that data.
Okay, fantastic. I've got Will, have you got any questions on any of the tech?
Yeah, just one on the just finalise, square the circle on the body-worn video, which is if we can see that information and evidence, that would be great. I think we hear a lot of anecdotal evidence, and indeed our complaints team see the same thing around the usefulness of body-worn video, but seeing the sort of scale of the evidence would be helpful. And then on specials, I just wondered, there's lots of benefits to specials, one being the sort of diversity of skills they can bring. Have we done anything sort of innovative around bringing in different types of skills via our citizens in policing programme?
So I can speak on a national level about this from being the national lead. So here in North Yorkshire, I want us to do further work on workforce mix within the organisation, so that we can utilise, as you've said, the skills of our special constabulary across the organisation, because special constabulary very much people join because of the traditional style of they want to come and put high visibility uniform on and go out there and deliver a traditional policing service, a visible policing service. But you're right, there are lots of work streams nationally where so bespoke business need for that force. So you might find that areas where there's lots of cybercrime or fraud, for example, there are people with those skills in their day job that could come in as a special constable. What I will say about that, though, is special constabulary is all about those warranted uniformed powers of a constable. And a lot of the work that we now do in some of those other skilled areas do not require the warranted powers of a police officer. So we all know we should also take into account that police support volunteers are really important in this area of business. There's a cost associated with training people and providing them with the kit and uniform to do a uniform warranted officer's job. And if they're not going to use those skills, they can use their skills as a police support volunteer instead. We need to make sure that the workforce mix is right and that we're making best use of those police powers. So it may be that you'll find police support volunteers are used in some of those wider fields of work rather than what you would consider as a fully warranted trained special constable. So it needs to be that balance of skills and need and the skills that they receive as a volunteer and putting that to best use efficiently and effectively to keep the public safe.
Okay, thank you. Tom, I think you've got a question.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, just a quick one, I hope. Just in terms of the comments you've got there about empowering communities, there's a lot there which is really good about ways that you're engaging with the communities. I just wondered whether there was any ways in which you are also helping communities to help themselves more rather than just simply engaging with them and getting their opinion on things. Is there a way that you are working with them to make sure that they can actually help prevent crime, help protect themselves better themselves as a community?
I mean, Sam, if you're happy for me to continue to take this before you go back to the next elements of your presentation. So one of the great examples of that is the cadet scheme. So volunteer police cadets is where young people who may have had less of a chance at the start of their life to have access to positive role models in their life or have access to some of the education or services that other children of their age have got. We've embraced those individuals into the cadet scheme where they can learn new skills, they can actually build resilience, they make new friends, and it is a route into other public service type jobs. So I think that's one great example where you actually empower somebody who's probably not got the life chances that others have to gain those skills and have access to some of that that fantastic programme that they can then go on and use to become a public servant, potentially a route into policing or other public services, but actually empowers them to take control of their own career choices and offers that opportunity.
Chief, could I give another example? Tom, I was over in Skipton last week, and I went out with one of our officers because I wanted to see the pilot that was currently over there, and I wanted to hear really on the ground about how staff are feeling. And we went out to a job that was really low level difficulty on a small estate, and by taking the housing officer with him, the colleague I was talking to ended up telling me how they'd unpicked some really quite long-standing issues with this member of the public on this little street, and the work that was being done at grassroots level to empower that whole street to really unpick some quite historic stuff that had gone on. We would never have had the time and the opportunity to do that without that real interface with our agencies. So, and what caused that morning was, you know, all the agencies had got round together down in the city centre and the town centre, and they discussed what was important to get to today, and trying to unpick this housing issue was a really important one, and that's what drove the activity around the community safety hub. So that's just another example of it.
Can I just ask a couple of other questions as well? Just looking at the slide that we've got here, it's good to see, Sam, that you've got some colleagues in the background there going and getting on with stuff. So that's good to see. There's quite a lot in here that is COVID will have impacted. So you think about preparing for changes in demand. We've seen huge changes in demand over the period of COVID. We've seen different uses of technology in with the public, the police and the public, but also support services with the public. So there's a whole different range of things that have sort of changed as a consequence of COVID. And so how is the work that you're doing? I mean, the police and crime plan that clearly couldn't take into consideration COVID because we'd had no idea that it was coming along. But how are you looking at what was quite a sort of traditional approach in the light of COVID and embracing some of the innovations that have taken place because of it?
So if I can give you just give you some early examples, of course, COVID happened, and I think like any big organisation, the paralysis it brings around suddenly, you know, your workforce is compromised, your workplace has got to look different, and yet we are a policing service, and therefore the need to be able to respond to the public is absolutely the priority. The very first protocol for us in terms of the learning has been to talk to staff. So we very quickly have surveyed our teams about, look, the first few weeks have been really bizarre and just very different, and the challenges are there. So what is working well at a local level, and what should we absolutely carry on doing that has just enabled us to do things differently? So surveying the staff has been a real priority for us. And then on top of that, very quickly, of course, is the need to get the opportunity within the organisation to talk about the learning so that we can put it into place now. We don't want to do a debrief in 6 months' time and talk about, you know, what on earth was COVID all about and where were the opportunities. So I actually think we've been very nimble at being able to very quickly, while we're still in this start of the recovery phase, talking to ourselves, because what we're asking our staff to do is talk to the public about how this is all going. So in a strange way, we're policing differently. We are trying to learn as we go along, and we're trying to pick up the opportunities to do things now. I think we all recognise as well, Commissioner, that we are probably not going back to any sense of what normality was before. So we've just got to move on with it. And where we think something is going to work better. And the one example that I know I've been talking to yourself about is, you know, it's got to be a positive thing for me that the public has a range of options to contact the police. And so doing it digitally, doing it from the comfort of their own home in a scenario and in a space that they're comfortable with is, for me, if the scenario is right, it's got to be a good thing. So why wouldn't we offer that as a tool to the public in North Yorkshire? And we are, as we speak, we are literally trying to put that practice in place as a normal way of operating. So we're just becoming much more responsive and able to deal with the public in a much more effective way. Especially not, we've always historically brought everybody into police stations and we'll invite them in and talk from there. So the ability to be able to go to people digitally and get things done in a lot more timely manner in a way that suits them has got to be the right thing. So we're trying to learn as we go, and I think that's a very positive position to be in. I think you're on mute, Commissioner.
Thank you. That's a 50p fine in the muting. I just also would like to thank the IT team, because they have pulled out all the stops to get us doing these teams and everything else. And it's really interesting because there are still forces around the country who can't do it. And some of our local authority partners are struggling with it as well. So it's really great to see how we've embraced that and done it really quickly. So I'd like to publicly thank those teams as well. OK, Sam, do you want to crack on, unless anybody else has got any further questions? No. OK.
So the next slide is talking about things we're looking to solve. So these are some of what we consider our challenges, and they really do link with the 5 objectives and what we're seeking to achieve. I suppose the first one I wanted to talk about was about achieving stability. North Yorkshire Police has gone through quite a period of change over the last 12 to 24 months. We have created a better way of working so that we can use our resources more effectively, and in particular all those functions that support the delivering of policing out in our communities. I've put it up there. It's called Enable North Yorkshire. It's brand new. We are just getting our heads around how do we get to resources and services much more effectively and prioritised. So there's something about stabilising, I think, the working environment for us, so that we deliver as consistent service to North Yorkshire communities. As I say, the completion of T2020, which was our savings programme, is really important to us, because we need to make the efficiencies where we identified so that we can invest in the future. And our investment, we've got the local contribution, and we've also got the national uplift coming down the agenda. All of these, of course, add to the totality of policing, but they're all opportunities about producing really a service that we can say we do the best by communities in North Yorkshire. So achieving stability and getting things working and clear, I think, is really something we're looking to solve. Improving working practice. Yes, sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah, Sam, can you just Lisa, can I just hand over to you for 1 second? Sam, there's just something popped up on the message that I need to deal with. So Lisa, I was just picking up on that whole sort of thing of stability. Do you think that's possible? Because we've seen a massive change in COVID. We've got the national uplift coming with lots of new police officers. We've still got a whole range of change programs to go through. So how do we get that sense of stability when we've still got a lot of change, and potentially we've got a big financial hit if we can't sort out some of the money in relation to the impacts of COVID? And all of that doesn't stack up to stability in my mind. It stacks up to yet more change.
Absolutely, that's a really important point. And I think while all of this work goes on in the background that Sam is talking about, and some of the challenges that we've just talked about, the stability for the actual frontline contact and service with the public is what we're trying to ensure is the bit that is stable throughout all of that change in the background. So we focus very much from an operational perspective on ensuring that things like our force control room, the bedrock of neighbourhood policing, the response teams, and the wider police family that we work with, that those contact areas of business that have that daily contact with the public are really, and this is what reinforcing local policing is about, is we make sure that those areas are protected and that people can go out there and deliver the job to keep people safe, while some of these things go on in the background in terms of our change programme. When we look at our budgets, and as you'll know from our executive board this morning, we have a great focus on making sure that the budgets are in the right place to deliver that service. So I think that the investment decisions in those areas that are most important to the delivery of service on the ground and keeping our public safe are the things that we try to protect and keep the day-to-day business running through our operational planning, whilst all of these changes go on in the background. But absolutely, we have concerns that some of the COVID-related issues, some of the finance issues that might come as a result of that, we have to protect the front line in terms of local policing delivery here in North Yorkshire and make more efficient and effective use of the assets that we've got in those circumstances. So that's really important to us, that we protect those people that protect the public.
Commissioner, you're on mute again.
It's getting a very expensive box. So has anybody else got any questions before I move on? And I remember I can't see the hands up function, so no. Okay, fantastic, Sam, off you go.
Okay, so we were talking about things we're looking to solve. Second one down, I've put improve working practices. We're always looking to make sure that the roadmap that we've got in front of us from an IT is the right one and is doing what we need to do. So I know certainly from the work I'm doing that I'm going to be prioritising some of the work on that roadmap in order to facilitate some of the change that we've talked about. So again, just that reassurance that we are constantly looking to say what's working and what is going to facilitate a better service out in the streets. The particular project that I've named on there, which is an acronym for TOM, which is our target operating model, is very much about working practices. It's very much about efficiencies and about saying, if there are inefficient ways that we are working, it must just improve. So, Commissioner, one of the piece of work I've worked on recently is about our use of vehicles and about making sure that we get people effectively to training is a really good example. We're not particularly efficient about how we're planning that. So again, the operating model will be looking at where our training bases are and how all that is planned out. And we've talked about the Safer Neighbourhood Service Desk and improving the options so that anybody who contacts North Yorkshire Police is probably going to have a wider selection of options to contact us. So that all really just give you a sense of the improvements in working practice that we're constantly looking to do.
So can I just let me just bring that to light a little bit, because I think it's quite important. So at the moment, historically, most people have had to travel to Northallerton to do their training, haven't they, or to a centralised location to do their training. North Yorkshire is 3,200 square miles, and that can, it takes quite a long time to get around North Yorkshire. So are you looking at more local solutions for training, or using Teams or whatever it is that we might want to use?
Yeah, a real mixture in there, Commissioner. Of course, central training is a good thing. It gives you consistency, it keeps control of the training. There is something also quite empowering about bringing people together who sometimes can be quite rural located. So I absolutely support central training, but there's also something about using local facilities as well. what we haven't been doing is then layering on, because as much as the public are spread across North Yorkshire, so is our workforce. So again, it makes no sense moving people around the county who are literally crossing over each other to go to a training venue. And so what we're not coordinating to a large degree is where people are coming from, and trying to cut down on travel time, on expense. So our resourcing team are very much in the thick of trying to make that whole footprint just much more efficient about where people are setting off from, where the training is taking place, and how we're delivering it, just to make it much more efficient. What that does is release resource and stops time being wasted when we can use it for other things.
Okay, that's really helpful. So that's just one example of how you're looking at efficiencies, and potentially how COVID might have helped.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So the third element here that I've listed is increasing productivity. Again, you'll see the word Tom come up quite a bit. That is, at the baseline here is about being as effective and as efficient with the resources that we've got. That is what the public would expect us to do. So trying to increase, so use of Microsoft Teams, we have revolutionised, I would say, overnight the way we are interacting within the organisation, and therefore it's got to become the way we do business. So increasing our ability to be much more connected, and we don't have to undertake the travelling to do it. Part of that work is also looking at how we task and brief our officers and send our staff out every day. We want to make sure that we're very clear that why people, when they leave the stations, what it is that they're targeting. So we are part of the target operating model is to look at the whole way we brief our officers and send them out with what priorities based around our police and crime plan. And again, I've given you another couple of examples there around the community safety hubs and the response tools. So again, this is all about increasing the options that officers and colleagues have to interface with North Yorkshire communities so that it's much more responsive. So again, I keep going back to this principle. You know, we have very successfully rolled out MS Teams in North Yorkshire for the police. The absolute need now is to roll it out for the public so that we have got a much more connected and effective way of talking to our public. So the use of that is going to make us much more productive. We will be able to see more people. We will be able to undertake more appointments. That's the sort of work we're doing on the back of this, just to become a lot more responsive and digitalised in the way we operate.
Okay, thank you. So a community public meeting by Zoom coming to you soon.
I can't wait, Commissioner. It's great.
Well, no, you know, Parish Council
Zoom is the
way. So can we. So
I agree.
I'm just conscious of time,
yes.
And I've interrupted you a lot. So
but Julie, just on that note, there is a PCSO dialing into a Parish Council Zoom meeting next week that I know about. So it's ongoing already.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. I mean, I just imagine if we'd had a community meeting in Richmondshire over some of the issues that we'd had via Zoom, we'd have had most of the town on the meeting. So stuff like that, really efficient and effective ways of working and engaging with people. So Sam, can I just we've got about 7 minutes.
Right.
So I will shut up
okay.
And we'll wait until you get to the end. Can you just pick out the most important points as we go?
Yep, I think on this slide I would put the focus on the bottom statement, which is about growth. So people in North Yorkshire should be reassured that, you know, there is investment coming into North Yorkshire Police. We've got local investment by yourselves as supporting a precept, so we are getting more and have got more officers on the back of that, and we've got the national uplift. So we are looking to grow as an organisation, and that gives us opportunities, and it's about how do we make better use of those resources.
So grow means more police officers?
Yes,
and more PCSOs?
Yes.
Right, and more volunteers?
Always more volunteers, Commissioner, because I just think there's a wealth of opportunity out there. So you've made the fantastic link to the next slide, then opportunities that exist to overcome it. And I'll fly through these because hopefully I've been weaving these in as the explanations as I've gone along. Of course, there's an officer uplift, and that is just a fantastic opportunity, isn't it, to invest? But it's about investing in the right areas and not just a scattergun place them wherever. It's about being clear about what your roadmap for technology looks like and being very, very smart at investing in the right things. There are colleagues far cleverer than myself supporting us in that, but from an operational point of view, I've got to keep that very live and accountability about what are we investing in. We've got a pilot going on in Craven. We should be learning as we're going. We've got a focus with this Chief Constable whose vision is to bring prevention and early intervention to life and get every facet of the organisation talking about prevention and early intervention. So where I'm sat at the moment, the afternoon shift for the major collision investigation team, you know, I've just been goading them for the last half an hour or so about how are you going to get into prevention then? How are we going to bring down the numbers, the number of people killed on our roads? You know, and it's been a really fascinating conversation, but that's where we need to get to.
Okay, so can I just give my road safety fund a plug there? Because
yes,
we have got, there is an opportunity at the moment for people to bid for money around road safety, and prevention is one of the things that we are trying to encourage, and that comes from the sale of the private number plate that we had, AJ1, and you can go on to the website to have a look at how you can access that funding.
Fantastic. Commissioner, I'm going to move on to the next slide, if that's okay, because I think looking forward is always really helpful. So we are looking, and it's a phrase that I really like, at the common purpose, because I think it's often there's a common purpose, then you get lots done. And this is about, as a policing organisation, recognising that there's lots and lots of agencies out there that the police should be much closer aligned with, and clarity about where we can make the best bang for our buck in North Yorkshire. It is about investing in our model. It is about the IT opportunities. It's about the pilot, and it's about targeting our resource. I just want to skip through. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get to the last slide because I think it's always good to end on the last slide. So things that I think you should personally hold me to account for, Commissioner, in what do we want to have in place in the next 12 months? We've got to demonstrably be able to show that actually we're much better at responding to what our public wants and meet their expectations. We've got to have a wider set of tools for our officers so that we've got choices in how we deliver our service. We've got an opportunity to commission the right services. We've got an opportunity to put that focus on problem solving that the Chief will constantly talk about and learn our lessons. But in all of that, we've also been given the remit really to look at our workforce and make sure that actually that the staff have got the skill set that we need in order for us to take any policing forward. And that, of course, is about also tackling some of our internal cultural challenges, where our teams are, how we operate, how we deliver our service. So I'm conscious of time. Hopefully I've made up a little bit of time there for you, Commissioner, because of course the final bit then is just any questions further from there.
Thank you. I think try to make it the time for our colleagues in the fire and rescue service is what I'm trying to do. So I haven't got any further questions. Will, have you got any further questions?
Just had one. It actually came up at our meeting earlier this morning, but it was how you go about, Sam, understanding not just the public sector partners that you work with at Community Safety Hubs, but the third sector and all the services that are in place for those people who do have specific needs, whatever they might be, and making sure officers know that there are things in place that they can refer people to that need help, because there's so much to keep in your head, or, you know, whether there's an app now that can store it all. But I know that's not straightforward.
No, Will, but that's it's a really important part of the work that we've set off on. Really, is around most of the calls, most of the problems in the whole of my service that I've ever turned up to as a police officer. There are root causes behind most things. And I know that lots of police will constantly quote about lots of our demand that comes through the door is not always about criminality. There's vulnerabilities, safeguarding, there's a whole range of issues. But when we start to look at how do we solve some of our root cause of what's going on, you've got to have the pathways into services to help the police solve some of the issues. So that work is absolutely part of the new target operating model and understanding how we access it. So I know one of the things I was briefing the Commissioner on over the last couple of days is, you know, being able to digitally very quickly get into those pathways for police officers to refer people into the right services. So that is a really key part of this work going forward, and we recognise that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Now, Tom, have you got anything you want to raise, or are we all right?
No, thank you. That's good. Thank you, Sam.
Great, fantastic. Then, Sam, thank you very much for that overview. And apologies, it got to be a bit of a canter towards the end.
No.
Okay. So fire thematic, which is realising our potential.
Good afternoon, Julie. Good afternoon, anybody who's watching. Yeah, the third priority in our CARE acronym in your Fire and Rescue Service Plan is realising our potential. And we put this presentation together a few months ago before the COVID lockdown led to the temporary suspension of the public accountability meeting and moving to the public update. But Andy Blades, who's now our group manager responsible for York and Selby, put the slides together, and he's going to talk us through the presentation. But of course, myself, Andy, and John Foster will all be able to answer any questions that you or anybody else has got. So I'll pass over to Andy Blades now.
Andy, thank you. Just can you just try and take it a couple of slides at a time so that we can interact a little bit? So it's so we've got a bit of dialogue going rather than just looking at slides. That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. And thanks very much for the opportunity to present this afternoon. I'm just going to bring up the presentation, and hopefully people have got sight of that now. So, as the Chief said, the opportunity this afternoon to present is around the realising potential, one of the 4 priorities within the Fire and Rescue Plan. Just testing through this. Not moving on, just bear with me. There. Yeah, so within the priorities, apologies because I've just got a few things going on my PC which aren't helping. So yeah, the realising the potential within the Fire and Rescue Plan is what we're looking at this afternoon. So how do we look after our people? What makes it inclusive for the people within the organisation? What's important to our people? The work environment that they actually experience on a day-to-day basis, the access they have to contemporary training and to IT, which we've talked through with police colleagues in the previous presentation, all elements that are really applicable to be a very satisfying, meaningful and productive environment for colleagues. So we want to take every opportunity to improve that diversity within the workforce. So we recognise within the Fire and Rescue Service in North Yorkshire, there remains a great opportunity to improve the diversity within the workforce. So we are predominantly male workforce, we are white in workforce, so a really good opportunity which will bring a huge amount of opportunities and benefits to the organisation if the diversity changes. That clear, inspirational, trusted leadership. So there's been some real shifts which I'll talk about as we go through the presentation, but in about developing that relationship that managers and more importantly leaders have in the organisation, so that on a day-to-day basis, again, it contributes to the value that people feel within the organisation, the service that we provide to the community, and then also the benefits that reaps in terms of reducing emergencies such as fires and other emergencies that are compromising the safety and well-being of people in the community. So linking that to our decision making and performance, which are measured, and again within this sort of environment, the accountability is really important, that we can demonstrate the route to making decisions, the rationale underpinning those decisions, and an improvement in the performance across the organisation, which also satisfies external influence such as the Her Majesty's Inspectorate, Constabularies of Fire and Rescue Services, alongside other areas, and recognise and maximise the value of all the staff.
Andy, can I ask a bit about diversity? Because
yes.
I think that I've just skipped through the slides, and this is the point to do it, I think, probably.
Yes.
So I just want people to understand quite how undiverse the fire and rescue service is, because I think that starting point needs to be understood. And actually, this isn't, and I want to just put this in the context, this is not just a North Yorkshire issue, it is across fire and rescue services across the country. So I don't want to sort of single North Yorkshire out in this, but I think, is it 12% of the entire workforce are female?
6%.
Sorry?
6% is
6% of female.
Yes, that's my recent information, and you know, you're absolutely right. That does reflect the national picture with regards to the fire and rescue service.
Okay, is that 6% on the front line or 6% in total?
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I'm talking very much the response environment there, right across the organisation, right at 12%.
Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, so I think that's really important for people to understand the starting point for this. And secondly, what percentage of the workforce is BAME?
3.8%.
Right, okay, so we've got quite a long way to go. What benefits do you think that improving that diversity will bring?
So the opportunity to bring in a much wider reflection of the community that we serve means that we can better understand the needs of that community. So very much at the moment, it's quite traditional in the way that the fire and rescue service has developed. And that goes right back to 1947, in fact, you know, when the fire service was first formed. So we're really not contemporary around driving the fire and rescue service in a different way. Huge amount of work has been done, and it's changing very rapidly, you know, nationally and within North Yorkshire. But certainly the benefits that we get from a more diverse workforce is that understanding of whether it's faith, religion, belief, race, age profiles. It's really important that we then tailor and measure our services to meet that community's need, rather than it being one-dimensional and not really getting into the most vulnerable areas of a community and those most at risk, and delivering those real benefits.
Okay, and so having said that then, what precisely are you doing about this?
Well, there's lots of proactive work around our recruitment at the moment, because we just at the moment got a programme of recruiting whole-time firefighters, and of course our on-call firefighters continually recruiting really. So the equalities, diversity and integrity inclusion groups are focused on very much around the positive action environment. So again, that's from a very operational emergency response position, but it's about making sure that everybody who is interested in joining the fire and rescue service have a good understanding of what that means on a day-to-day basis. So again, from a response point of view, people can think about it being very much around fire engines, responding to emergency incidents, and not having the opportunity to understand some of that day-to-day community activity, which is much more about engaging with people, talking to people, the communication to meet those needs. So real positive action to say to people, come and look at what North Yorkshire can offer, come and get a good understanding of what the role of a firefighter is, and that will help us broaden that diversity. And of course, that goes right across the organisation to all work streams within the organisation to make sure there is that clarity around it. So the ED&I group are very much engaged in that positive action work, and then also looking about the day-to-day working environments. So understanding that work setting, what it means for individuals. So one thing that we've pushed through very recently that's quite a key objective is an impact assessment of a work environment for any person working in the organisation. So around gender, do the facilities that we have in some of our working environments meet all the needs of anybody who works at that location? So that's another proactive approach we're doing with regards to reflecting diversity.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, did you want to come in there?
Yes, thank you. Andy's absolutely right in everything he says about the positive action work that we carry out to attract as broad a group of people as possible to apply to the Fire and Rescue Service, especially for those groups who traditionally don't. We've also put in place some practical measures to include as many people as possible and avoid excluding anyone who might make an ideal firefighter. So, for example, at the firefighter entry point, we've removed the requirement for GCSEs because we can assess maths and English in other ways. But if we put in a requirement for GCSEs, we know those groups of people who are least likely to be able to apply, who are most likely to be excluded. We've removed the need for a driving licence at the point of entry. There's a requirement to get one, but again, that's because we recognised that we were excluding particular groups of people by making that a requirement, and really it's not an essential requirement of the job at the point of entry. So we attract as many people as we can, and then we remove as many of the barriers that prevent people, especially those from particular backgrounds, from being able to apply once they have shown interest. And then at the more senior levels that we are recruiting into as well, we're also trying desperately to attract a greater diversity of people to apply, and we've had phenomenal success in terms of attracting numbers of people over the last 6 months or 9 months or so. I'm not aware of any fire service that has had 22 applications for group manager jobs, 12 applications for a deputy chief, 20 applications to become an area manager, and we're going now into the station manager tier of recruitment. And what we're doing is we are working very closely with national networks, the Women's Network, the Race Network, the LGBT Network, to ask them to market our opportunities on our behalf to their members. Once people have put in that application, of course, everybody's on an equal playing field, and we choose the best candidates. But another thing that we're moving from and to is we're moving away from a recruitment and high potential process where somebody's year's service or somebody's number of jobs that they've done or the type of work that they've done are necessarily the most important feature. So we've moved to recruiting on the basis of people's values, behaviours and attitudes, as long as we have confidence that they will pick up the skills that they need to do the job once they're in post. So we're looking much more for the person rather than the skills that they bring at the point of entry, albeit they've got to show us that they're able to develop those skills. Now, despite doing all of this, we still struggle because the pool of people for promotions from other backgrounds other than white men is very small. So we're fishing in a small pool effectively. And when I look at the last lot of firefighter recruitment we undertook, 25 successful applicants, of only 2 of whom were women, for example. And that's because such a small percentage of applicants are women. But the people who are successful, the percentage of successful people tends to be reflective of the percentage of people from those groups who apply in the first place. So if we have 8% of applicants who are women, likelihood is at least 8% of the successful people at the end of the process will be women. So that positive action that Andy talked about at the start, that attracting as diverse a pool of people to apply in the first place, is very, very important if the end result is to be more positive in terms of the diversity of the workforce. And then what Andy talked about, our ability to then better serve the public that we exist to serve, because we better understand their needs and we can better access all parts of the community.
Fantastic, thank you both. Andy, we've just covered your next 2 slides, I think, probably. Please continue.
Thank you. So I will move on because, say, they are covered. I would just like to point out some of the developments that are there that are really key to it. You know, so from a legislation point of view, from a real compliance point of view, that operational license, what that means is that there's a really ingrained process now to make sure people have the right level of competence to operate safely in the environment, and that's supported by some examples there of the new equipment and technology that's coming in. So hydraulic rescue tools talk about some of the rescue equipment at the scene of a road collision, and why that's really important, because the previous equipment had presented a risk, albeit very low, but it was a risk of a hydraulic needle injury from using it. So at a very task-based level, that's making a much more safer environment for people working in that environment, but also it delivers a much better service with the people that we're trying to support.
Thank you.
The challenges, as we say, you know, within North Yorkshire, the opportunity to attract the diversity is there's a greater opportunity to get out there and start to connect with the community. So how we do that is a challenge at the moment. It's something that we're very much focused on. And national drivers around the pay broadening of the role debate, again, some of the areas which we'd like to develop in are very much dictated by a national position. So they do present challenges to us being able to move on at the pace that we'd hope to. And again, the work environments that I mentioned there with regards to potentially being uninspiring in the current time. The opportunities, the collaboration work which is currently ongoing with regards to police colleagues around Enable North Yorkshire already start to see some financial savings, such as the co-location at the headquarters. And we know that collaboration across all sectors will help us realise financial savings, and it's that save to invest opportunity that will allow us to progress and move forwards. That greater diversity, as we mentioned, gives us that new way of working. Different ideas, different views, different opinions means that we will be a lot more dynamic and flexible in our working approach, and make us much more effective in terms of that community the service that we deliver. The risk and resource model, which is currently active as a project within the organisation. So what that's doing is considering the risk that is presented today to North Yorkshire as a county in the City of York, because the integrated risk management plan, the IRMP that previously existed, is due for a new evaluation. So that risk may well have changed. So it's really important that we make sure that our understanding of risk within the county is contemporary, and then the resources that we have to respond to that risk, again, are proportionate, effective, and present best value for money. And there's a great opportunity now within that project to consider where we are within the response profile to the county. New organisational structure to adopt intent-based leadership. So there has been a real shift within the organisation from a corporate management board structure to a senior leadership team, and that has been renewed and refreshed, which is then has a layer below, which is the tactical leadership team, feeding into the strategic leadership team. And what that does is it means that the middle manager cadre have the opportunity to steer, direct and influence the day-to-day activity and allow the strategic view to progress forward without the real need to get into the tactical day-to-day matters that arise within that structure. So that brings that intent-based leadership, empowering people having people with the opportunity to really make an influence. And talking from a district perspective, for the district of York and Selby, certainly having the ability to be able to consider the risk within that district, what's the best resourcing within the district and the response to that risk to make sure that it's the most efficient and effective it can be. Of course, with that is the accountability and the responsibility. And that moves through all layers of the organisation within the supervisory manager structure, and really importantly for the people on a day-to-day basis operating at a task and tactical level, having the ability to make real changes and drive the organisation forward. As it says there, the HMI CFRS, so Her Majesty's Inspectorate for the Fire and Rescue Service, will drive some change for the report findings to help us understand where the organisation can improve in terms of the performance. We did have areas where we performed well, were good, but also there were areas for improvement. So that's another mechanism of accountability for North Yorkshire as a Fire and Rescue Service in the national picture. And the clear direction. So the Fire and Rescue Service plan combined with Ambition 2025 are two real key paths and give us the direction to then build district and more local plans and service delivery plans to actually meet the objectives, the update aims and the key priorities of both of those documents. Just pausing.
Okay. Fantastic. So I have a sort of question really, it's probably for Andrew, and that is, Andrew, Ambition 2025, it's really important. How are you making sure that people understand what that is all about and start to believe in it?
Thank you. Several ways I'm doing that really. I first presented, so I wrote Ambition 2025, which sets out my ambition for North Yorkshire Fire Service over the next 5 years and what I think we can become. I published that in December internally within the organisation, and then in January we held what was called a Shared Learning Week, which started on the 6th of January. And during that Monday morning, that first Monday morning, 60 leaders, managers and influencers from within the service got the presentation that I put together to explain what Ambition 2025 was all about. The rest of that week, we then had lots of different learning opportunities and subjects so that people were skilled and knowledgeable enough to go off and start to deliver it. All of those managers and leaders who were there were tasked with making sure that every single person in the organisation received the Ambition 2025 talk. So they went out and they delivered that. So everybody's now heard of Ambition 2025. They know what it's about. They know their part in it. And lots of people are now starting to do exactly what I've, I suppose, enabled and encouraged them to do within the presentation and within Ambition 2025 report. Now, there's another couple of ways that I'm continuing to share that. When opportunities arise, people have ideas that are perhaps stifled, or people have ideas that are encouraged and come to fruition. I write regularly to every member of staff through a weekly report that we provide, an update. And I align Ambition 2025, the principles and the tools, to whatever has happened or hasn't happened, to encourage people, to help them to understand how to apply those principles and tools practically. So that's helping people to get more and more aware of what Ambition 2025 is about and how to apply it and what it means to them individually. And then a next stage that I'm now able to go down, and dates are being arranged at the moment, is for me to personally present Ambition 2025 to every member of staff using Microsoft Teams, because we've now got video conferencing facilities installed in all of our fire stations, our headquarters and at the Transport and Logistics Hub. So I can talk to 8, 9, 10, 12 groups at once, and that will mean that they've had it from their own direct manager, and they've also had it directly from me as the Chief Fire Officer. I suppose the last part of embedding Ambition 2025 and making sure that it's operating is the work that will be done by our Head of Assurance, and Jonathan, who is head of assurance, he will be putting together an evaluation framework and toolkit so that people can start to evaluate the impact that their work has. So if we rewind 18 months, my very first public accountability meeting, I gave a pledge to the public of North Yorkshire and to you as the Commissioner that I would be able to demonstrate the causal effect of the work that the fire service carries out on the public's performance. And we're now nearing that point. So I've got the culture set, I've got the empowerment set, and soon in the coming months, we will start to get a toolkit where people can evaluate the impact that their work has, the causal effect that it has on the public's behaviours and therefore the public's performance. And that will start to take us into the longer term embedding and implementation of Ambition 2025. But roughly, I suppose, that's what's been done so far in terms of sharing it and making sure that everybody understands it.
Thank you, Andrew. Julie just nipped off for a minute, but she'll be back in a second, but we can carry on in her absence.
Fine. I would add as well with regards to that delivery, from a district perspective for York and Selby, following on from the leadership week in the start of January, we held a supervisory manager development day. So it's a one-day event rather than the 4 days, but it brought together every manager, leader who operates on a day-to-day basis with members from fire stations and frontline colleagues, and they all observed the videos of the Ambition 2025, and I presented the overarching document as well. So it was a really good opportunity to pass on that information, to share the understanding, and also set the direction from a middle manager perspective to the colleagues that I work with on a day-to-day basis about how we drive forward and deliver Ambition 2025 in connection with the Fire and Rescue Service Plan.
Andy, can I just step in there 1 second? Because one of the things we've learned is that we've set the ambition, we've given people freedom and flexibility to get on and do what they need to do in their local community to make it real. And one of the things that we've learned over the past few months is people had become accustomed to effectively doing what they were told. So they weren't having to think for themselves as much as perhaps they need to now, and they didn't need to be as aware of the political environment. And when I say the political environment, I don't mean party politics. I mean the nuances of working in an environment where there is a national direction, where there's local direction, where there are representative of the trade unions, and I suppose people don't operate their freedom and flexibility in a vacuum. They operate it within a set of arrangements which they're becoming more and more accustomed to working within, but are still learning. So John Foster, the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, who's on the call, is setting up 2 days to bring in lots of managers and leaders so that they can learn about that environment, learn more about it from the people who operate it, so that when they're thinking about exercising their freedom and flexibility, they're doing so with a better understanding of some of the implications of the decisions that they make, so that they'll have the complete picture then. They'll know Ambition 2025, but they'll also know some of the constraints and some of the barriers that they need to navigate their way through to be able to achieve what it is that they're hoping to do so.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah, go on.
So just moving on to the next slide with regards to the aims there of the organisation, it really is all about people. And we recognise, and the Chief Officer has stated very clearly in the communication that we have with on a regular basis, that people are absolutely key to getting things done. They can be the blocker to stopping things happen. So it's really about making sure that people take the most from this working environment that North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service can offer them, making them feel valued, making them feel involved, making them feel included, and right across the organisation. And that's done in a way through effective leadership, the transparency and developing the trust, I think, is absolutely imperative really to how we move forward as a fire and rescue service, and it supports that, as it says, effectiveness and efficiency. So really measuring what we deliver on a day-to-day basis, making the returns to the community and seeing the improvements which we would expect as a modern and contemporary fire and rescue service. And the safety element there, what you talk about, is the safe environment for the community and the public that we serve, preventing emergencies, fires, road traffic collisions, which we have been successful in doing, North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service and nationally, but there's still the opportunity to keep reducing those events, so it is a safe environment for people that live, visit and work within North Yorkshire and the City of York, but also for those that operate on a day-to-day basis, they do that in the most safe and effective way that's available. So within that model, as I said, we have the accountability and responsibility for our actions, our direction and driving things forward. The freedom and flexibility around that, as the Chief has just mentioned, but the opportunity to develop the measuring and monitoring has been identified, and with the new head of assurance within the organisation at strategic level, it means that that is an area of improvement that is now progressing and will allow us much more empirical data to be able to evidence the benefits and improvements which we make as a service, and all the time underpinned by the opportunity of maximising value for money, so that medium-term financial plan and future successful financial management of the organisation allows us to operate, but more importantly invest and try and make those work environments much more rewarding to the colleagues that work within the fire and rescue service. So the tools that are built within Ambition 2025 and the fire and rescue service plan around prevention, so going out, working with the community to stop things from happening, protection from a business fire safety point of view, working with businesses and organisations, and a key area around that is automatic fire alarms, for example. Looking at that measurement and monitoring, it's evident that automatic fire alarms are still an area that we would want to work and drive down, so that protection is a really key piece of work. Responding to emergencies and our resilience right across the sector which we operate in, including some of the more protracted and adverse events that North Yorkshire and the City of York sees, such as widespread flooding. Working in partnership with other organisations, local authorities, community groups, third sector, will enable us to be able to deliver that direction. So what will it look like in the future? The diversity across the organisation, I think, is a huge difference that can be made, and very much a key driver within the service at the moment, so that the estate reflects the needs of a very diverse workforce. As I've mentioned previously about gender being more balanced within the work environment, does the facilities that we have meet those needs? But that's right across the diverse workforce, to make people feel more valued and confident around their work. Training is absolutely imperative. We have a very good structured training at the moment. I mentioned the operational licence, but also in areas such as business fire safety, we have qualifications that formally educate and inform people with regards to the day-to-day operating. But we also look wider than that as well with regards to leadership development, and the Shared Learning Week at the start of this year was a really good example of including everybody across the organisation in that leadership event to start to develop the understanding and really have conversations and promote that diverse workforce needs and the opportunities we have to reflect that. It's measured very often within staff surveys, so the service does conduct regular staff surveys. We also see that through the HMI, CFRS. We'll also do staff surveys to give us a balance. But to get an understanding of what it feels like on a day-to-day basis for colleagues within the organisation and drive that continuous improvement. And the 3 pillars that it mentions there within the inspectorate is the efficiency, effectiveness and people. And again, as I mentioned before, the accountability at that level also meets the accountability of the local community through this type of meeting. And that brings us...
I don't think that was by accident or design, Andy, but you are absolutely bang on time. Well done. Has anybody got, I suppose, I mean, my only question really is that diversity is not an easy fix and it's going to take time. And I suppose, I think it's important, you know, when you say what the future look like, so that's not going to be in 12 months time. That's going to take a considerable amount of effort and time, not least because obviously, you know, we've got limited numbers of new people we can bring into the organisation over a period of time. So I think that's important to just recognise that. And of course, we don't have a huge amount of cash. So in terms of redesigning our physical estate, that is a challenge too. So I think it's important to understand actually some of this is not easy and it's going to take quite some time.
No, from my point of view, you know, I think it's really important to reflect that. It's clear that whilst the ambition and the intention and the drive to make those changes is very evident within the workforce, and genuinely I believe that, you know, with myself and colleagues, but it is very much balanced against the opportunities for us to be able to do that. And again, you know, to our on-call part of the organisation is in communities whereby they're not hugely diverse communities. Yes, really good opportunity to have much more, to have many more females work within the fire and rescue service, women in the fire service, but those diversity areas as well, something that we really need to work on to see how broad we can make that diverse environment.
Okay, and I suppose I've just got one final question really. The police have done some good work on this, on diversity, over the last couple of years. Are you learning from what they've done?
Yes, I think that the shared learning week where we start to contact the intent-based leadership workshops that have gone on were joint, for example, with police colleagues. So in those settings where our leaders have the opportunity to have those conversations, get an understanding of how things work in a more informal manner, developing all the time, but also through the equality, diversity and inclusion groups, having members from the police organisation coming into those meeting groups as well to help us understand how we can drive forward some of them opportunities. So yes, early days, but definitely that is the direction.
Okay, and I think Andrew and John, did you want to come in?
Do you want to go first, John?
Yeah, if I can, please. Good afternoon, everyone. So just to follow on from one or two points there that have been raised about what we're doing and what we're learning with the police. A good example of what we've learned from the police and how we can embed things further within the service is about our whole-time recruitment. So I am aware that the police do a blend of both new recruits into the organisation off the street, but also ability to transfer into the service from other services, police forces. And we've now adopted the same procedure within North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service. So we will be taking a mixture of both transferees into the service, and that offers up an opportunity, hopefully, for diversity within that. And so we can target and still do positive action within that process. But then also there's still work to be done, and we are very conscious that the way that we embed diversity in the culture within the organisation, we've got an awful lot of work still to do on that. We tend to rely too much on e-learning, and we need to think broader than that. So again, working alongside our police colleagues, we need to learn what's been done there so that we can go out and physically make visits and do workshops and sessions to embed the culture a little bit better within our organisation.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, I suppose it would be remiss not to cover some of the positives that are emerging from the new approaches. So we are attracting about greater diversity to join the service, and we are managing to access greater diversity in delivering our services. I think it's really important, particularly for the public watching, not to think that we're chasing numbers here, or not to think that we're chasing particular groups of people. When I'm talking about diversity, yes, I'm talking about some of the physical characteristics that people have, but also the diversity of thought that people bring. So that example that I gave of removing the need to have particular GCSEs to join the Fire and Rescue Service is recognising that young men from whatever background, well, of whatever race, for example, are often less likely than young women to have those qualifications. Young men from deprived backgrounds are less likely than young men from middle-class backgrounds. And it's trying to remove those barriers to attract this diversity of experience that brings the diversity of thought that will make us so much better at delivering our services. And some of the stuff that Andy's really eloquently talked about there, about Ambition 2025, is starting to come to fruition. So we've now got firefighters, for example, in Harrogate, who are bringing the most vulnerable people, the homeless, rough sleeping people in Harrogate, to the station for food. And once they've got them, of course, they've got access to them. They can help them to keep themselves healthy, safe and secure and well. That's incredible kind of expansion of what would normally be seen as a traditional role of a firefighter, but a great way to access those most vulnerable people. And then if we expand that to work in partnership with others to do the same thing, of course, then those people can be helped by other agencies as well. We have firefighters up in the moors, our volunteer firefighters who are now working on water safety, on tombstoning safety, to try and reduce the numbers of injuries and accidents around that. And that's people recognising that they've now got the freedom and flexibility to not wait to be told what to do, but to identify the hazards in their local area, the risk of those hazards causing harm, and then trying to tackle them by whatever means they see most appropriate and that will have the greatest effect. The moment we've got that evaluation toolkit in place, they'll then be able to measure the success of the different approaches that they can take, and then direct their efforts to where they know they have the greatest impact. And at that point, we really will be a fire and rescue service that can demonstrate great value for money in terms of people being able to come to work and do the best that they can and the most that they can, and also then be able to redirect themselves to where they know that they have the greatest effect. And once we're in that position, when we get to that position, we'll be reasonably unique in being able to give that level of detail and that level of evidence about the value that we add as a fire and rescue service to the communities of York and North Yorkshire.
Great. Unless anybody's got any further questions, then I'll draw that element to a close. We'll come back to you later on with your performance slides, Andrew, John and Andy. So has anybody got any further questions on that? No. Okay, great. So if I could now then hand over to the police to go through their slides on performance. I have to say, I never thought in 8 years of doing this job I would see slides like this. Unfortunately, it's been due to a global pandemic in terms of reductions of crime as opposed to anything else. But I think the numbers are quite extraordinary. And of course, it doesn't take us through the whole of the pandemic period. So over to the police.
Okay, good afternoon, Julia. It's Annette Anderson here. So hi, I'm talking to you through. I can't see the slides on the screen to share. If somebody could support me with that.
I'll do it now.
Thank you. So while
Sorry, Lynette, we're just trying to keep the, it's a bit difficult when you've got data slides like this, but we're just trying to keep the slides down to a minimum and the talking to a maximum.
Right, yeah, no, absolutely understand this, and there's quite a lot of slides to go through, but I just wanted to touch upon your comment. This period covers April and May. So a lot of the changes that we're going to see now is in relation to COVID-related impact. Massively challenging period, as we know, because it's been really hard to predict about any changes in incidence and demand. And I have to say, it's been an absolute credit to our staff, our partners and the public, really, about dealing and getting through the first part of the response phase, hopefully leading into some form of recovery. So although it was difficult for us to not being able to predict, we put plans very early on, both internally within the force and with our partners, to really closely monitor some of the changes, some of the emerging threats and risks, as well as being mindful about our workforce. So we've got resilience within there, and it's so far, as I say, been a real credit how everybody's stepped up. So I'll just take you through.
Sorry, can I just check with you, because I just want to check I haven't got an out-of-date slide pack. On mine, it looks like it's to March, the end of March, not the end of May.
Right. Okay. I think you've got a different one, Tom. Sorry. There's a latest one there.
There is. We were going to cover the outturn report in this meeting, and then cover it. But if you were going, Annette, were you going to cover the most recent one?
Yeah. I've just got April.
I can change that one. That's okay. No worries.
Yeah. Okay.
So what are we looking at then? Are we?
1 minute.
Tom's changing the slides to be the last 2 months rather than the previous year.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Right. Yeah.
The slides we were about to look at are interesting there. They're worth doing, another time maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can talk. So the first slide that you are going to see is in relation to mental health. There was a spike initially around about 6-7 months ago, if you remember, and that was related to how we define the changes in definition for public health. So again, we had a sort of a better understanding about that. Through the last 2 months, we anticipated that we would have further calls for service around mental health. We haven't seen any of those changes. However, and also within our section 136 detentions, we have not had any in April and May. However, we're really mindful over the next few months the impact that the COVID has had on families and individuals. So it is a priority. Certainly with our partners, with the Mental Concordat, it's a priority within the Local Resilience Forum, which is all the partner agencies, that will look at making sure that we've got that mental health provision in place. So again, understanding particular needs and being able to respond appropriately to that. But in terms of incidents, we haven't seen any increase. If we can go to the next slide.
Sorry, I've just got a little question about that. So now I'm looking at both presentations. So in the year up to March, the incidents with the mental health tag were 15.7%, but the average. But we have seen in the last 2 months that go up to 19.94%, which would suggest there is an increase in the proportion of incidents with mental health tags.
Yeah, you're right. So we haven't seen overall month on month any sort of any particular changes, but we have seen changes in incidents. So we've seen a decrease in incidents overall. So it's a proportion of that, but there is some more work I'll be doing in relation to understand what that additional increase is compared to all over incidents.
Okay, because I suppose this has been a source of discussion at a national level, as you'll be aware, but also when you talk to some of the providers that we have of services, so for example, Parents Against Child Exploitation, who are a commission service that they reprise, they will report a lot of increased tension and difficulties in households and those types of situations. So it'd be very interesting to sort of understand how the nature of some of these incidents have changed, as well as the number. Very much so, and that is again the importance of our partnership work and the information that we've got from our sort of multi-agency safeguarding forums that we all work to. So as I said, we all recognise that this is going to potentially be a sort of a real issue, and it may need a different level of support and services. So there's work ongoing now to really understand that, and again coming out in terms of the recovery phase. Okay, so again, moving on to 136, there was a very low volume. That isn't a particular surprise due to, again, sort of COVID. There were 10 incidents that required police transportation. Most of these were a result of risk assessments, and 41% resulted in admissions, which was actually slightly lower than our average, which is normally around 70%. So again, it's making sure that we really understand the rationale around the 136 providing the training, but we really do look underneath all of these incidents to make sure that we have got made the right response at that time. So just on that then, obviously during this period though, the NHS, because the health-based places of safety are based in hospitals, aren't they? Yeah. And hospitals were busy dealing with COVID during this period. So one perhaps would expect fewer people to be admitted during this period.
Yeah, and that might be the reality of this. And again, there's very unusual set of circumstances around COVID, the impact that's had on particularly sort of the NHS and public health and all others that might have had an impact on the outcome of some of these. And I think that's what we need to really understand to learn from that and take that forward. But absolutely right. I think that might have had an impact too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is. I mean, all this seems to be doing is giving us a sort of more to try and understand, really, doesn't it? It
does, and I think that's the thing with a lot of the way that we are understanding the impact of COVID and what impact that's had. So it is really early days, but it's really important that we learn from some of the data that we're getting and really understanding what's beneath that. So that is the work that's ongoing now, particularly with our insight team as well, really trying to get underneath some of this. And it's going to change yet again as we come out through as restrictions are relaxed further, and they're going to be again sort of changes across the whole sort of force area that we really need to understand. And that's why I think the plans that we currently have in place and measures and closely monitor them. So this is done daily and weekly about any emerging sort of themes and trends, so we can respond while some of the longer term implications and understanding is being worked through. I mean, and again, it's not just within our force. This is changes that we've seen nationally across other police forces too.
Yeah, I mean, so in contradiction to what I've just said, then, Annette, if you look at the difference, in actual fact, we've had proportionately more people go in ambulances than in the back of police cars during COVID, which is what one might expect. But of course, we do now also have fewer places of safety, don't we? And actually, if you look at where the suites that have been used, it's mostly Scarborough and York during this period, whereas in the previous period we were using Darlington and Middlesbrough and Harrogate more, obviously because Harrogate was open. But it might be a reflection of that as well. It might be interesting to see that if they're going to more local suites, whether we get more local ambulance support.
Yeah, and again, that's something we can look at, Commissioner. Yeah.
Okay.
So if less anything on that, if we can move on to the next slide, which is incidents incidents and crime. So in terms of incidents, so the force level again has reduced significantly. The next 4 slides are just replicated across the force area, and it equates to a 22% decrease in incidents. Again, it's not something that we sort of anticipated. We're looking at, again, sort of understanding the breakdown of the data. What we do know, and it'll come later on, but the antisocial behaviour calls increased significantly. Much of that was again COVID related. In terms of crime, coming back to your point to begin with, Commissioner, having over the last 2 months 37% decrease in overall crime is significant. Some of them is absolutely closely connected to COVID-related restrictions such as shoplifting and other areas are connected maybe to the nighttime economy with the pubs being shut and various other things. Violence against a person, which, as you know, is one of our volume crimes, has decreased. The 2 areas that have shown slight increases is drug offences, and that is cannabis possession, about 30 more additional offences across the force area, and possession of weapons, a small increase, and that is again with bladed articles. So overall, crime has dropped significantly. However,
sorry, can I I just want to go back to the knives point. So that is really interesting, isn't it? So you've seen an increase in drugs, and I know you had some really good operations around drugs during COVID. Is that possession of weapons a reflection of the increased activity around drugs and the fact that the criminals who are dealing and transporting the drugs have got weapons?
I can't correlate that, without knowing the details of the particular incidents, but this period has created some areas of more proactivity as well. Again, with the lockdown, with less people on the street, so it would be a combination of a number of factors. I can't exactly say that is the case. In terms of the actual drugs related activity within it, but again, it's something that we're looking at, and I'll be able to come back to you with that.
I think that'd be really interesting because every other single crime type is reduced.
Yeah.
So if those are on paper, so if those are the only 2 that are increasing, it would be a very substantial increase in possession of weapons if it were the crimes that were decreasing, if you see what I mean. So if you've got, I don't know, violence against the person has gone down by 33.7%, but possession of weapons has gone up by 6%, that difference is massive. So you'd have to, it would be a very significant increase in the set of that context. So on the face of it, they would seem to be related.
Yeah, potentially, and again, that's something that we just need to look at in further detail. But without a doubt, there's been more proactivity during this period as well. But again, it's these sort of nuances and changes that we just need to get sort of more detail about.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just talk a little bit? So I haven't had the benefit of seeing these, but I'd like to talk about sexual offences here and domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Now, sexual offences down by 60%. We know that the majority of sexual offences are not committed by strangers, but by people who are known to people. Why do we think that sexual offences have dropped by 60%, or do we think they have dropped, or do we think that that is a problem that is being stored up for later?
Potentially both. So again, with the sexual offences, some of that may be connected to nighttime economy, gone, sort of out, alcohol related. There's a various, sort of number of type of incidents within sexual offences overall. So it is there absolutely is 21 difference of offences. So it is a combination. We do anticipate that because of the lockdown, there may be difficulties in reporting. We've done lots of awareness in different ways within our partnerships to try and raise awareness about different reporting. Understanding it may be difficult both in sexual offences and, as you know, with domestic abuse, people being able to make that contact. So again, it may be that there may be late reporting. It's something that we're again closely monitoring in relation to that. In connection with the domestic abuse, you know that we've had multi-agency partnership meetings every week. So again, that has been able to really get underneath some of the reporting, or whether it's that awareness or it's not being able to report. So we've put a lot of measures in place, and we've learned as we've gone along, just to make sure that those victims do have access to reporting and services as best as we can.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think it might be worthwhile just publishing the table that we've been collating on this, because that's starting to show some quite interesting stats now. Jenny's been drawing it together, and I think that might be worthwhile just adding that to this slide pack.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the other thing that has been a really good opportunity, and with your support, Commissioner, has been the domestic abuse deep dive work around really getting underneath some of the data that we've got, and particularly around hopefully the speed of that work. So it really will help us with the recovery and our response to the recovery, and to support victims of domestic abuse, and obviously work with sort of perpetrators as well.
Yeah, so just just for the benefit of the public, the deep dive is a initiative that's come out of central government, and I think there's 5 force areas around the country who are participating in that deep dive, which will go to the results of which will go to the National Policing Board next month. Okay.
Okay. If we can move on to the next slides again, it just gives. Tom, have you got that? If we can just move to.
Sorry. Can you just go back to the one with the regional, the neighbourhoods? That is really interesting.
Right.
Sorry, I've not seen these slides before. So the drug offences in Craven stands out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, and that was possession of cannabis. There were, I think, from recollection, about 12 possession of cannabis offences. More so, again, the numbers are small, but in terms of percentage, absolutely significant. And that again is a result of, say, sort of proactivity within that particular area throughout the period.
Can I just ask? Sorry, go on, Will.
Well, I just wonder if it reflects the nature of the policing that was done during COVID. So if there was lots of visible patrolling in places like Craven, where there was a bigger problem with people breaking lockdown, for example, you're more likely to then stop others who are committing crime, and shouldn't be out there on the roads. So there might be a correlation between the sort of patrol plan in any command and some of these sort of more proactive stops that they make.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just got the figures here. So it there was the 8 additional sort of crimes, and it was all possession of cannabis. So yeah, I've said it. There was more proactivity, the way that we were making sure that, with our 4 E's about supporting the NHS and COVID, of course that meant that there was more sort of engagement within those areas. So I would suggest that is the same. But again, we'll do some more work to really get underneath some of these figures.
Yeah, because it's really interesting the way it spreads. It splits up around the county. So York has got a decrease, but of course we did see quite a big increase in resources in rural areas during COVID in comparison to normal. And so, that's quite interesting as well. It'd be very interesting to have a look at this in a bit more detail.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is really, because this is about policing in a pandemic. We were given, as everyone is well aware, different powers. So there's an awful lot of interest, and particularly from ourselves around understanding some of these changes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Annette.
Okay. So moving on from the other areas. So if we just move on to some of the proactivity slides again over this period, and what you will see on the whole, and I think it goes back to your point as well. Well, that was well made. There was an awful lot of COVID-19 patrols. So again, it just reinforces that there was a significant amount of our specialist resources that were supporting the response to COVID, and of course I think that some of that's factored in some of the changes there.
Okay, and just sorry, can you just go back to the previous slide, Annette, because I wanted to just have a look at RTCs. Yeah, has that one got KSIs on it? So obviously we saw a big reduction in KSIs over this period because nobody was driving around. But we did have some pretty terrible driving, didn't we? And nasty.
Sorry. Yeah, we did, and again that was part of our sort of policing response in relation to that. There were it allowed for some significant increase in speeding. So again we made sure that the camera vans, that we still continued with protecting road users throughout this entire period. But yes, unfortunately, there were still a number of serious, accidents because of that inconsiderate driving.
And then the other thing that's really, sorry, there's so much on here that's interesting. So the other thing that's really interesting on here is missing persons.
Yeah.
So when you talk to our third sector support providers, they report, particularly PACE, real difficulties around missing persons, and whether or not people were reporting missing people because they were supposed to be in lockdown.
Yeah, again, this was a real surprise to see this. We anticipated more, again, just because of the difficulties of the COVID-related restrictions. There's more work that we need to do to understand the split between children and young people and adults. So again, it's just really understanding that. There's been no indications it was to us directly that it was because of not reporting because of that. But of course, that may be the case. So again, there's more that we just need to really do about understanding that particular decrease, because it's significant, it's massive.
So I'm getting some data from PACE, from Parents Against Child Sexual Exploitation, and they're doing a bit of a piece of work looking at all of this. And I think it's going to tell you quite a different picture to what is being said on the slides. So I think when we get that, it'll be really interesting to sort of understand that context.
Right. Then that again sounds really useful information. Is that particular to North Yorkshire, or is it the national picture, or just a breakdown to North Yorkshire?
It's North Yorkshire, yeah.
Right, brilliant. Okay. Well, it'd be really interesting to do, because again, there's you know, sort of you mentioned there's many, you know, sort of the data, just numbers tell us is one thing, but really getting underneath that is a different thing, and that's work that we're already on with now. But yeah, it'd be interesting to get the PACE.
Yeah.
Data. Okay, so moving on to, I've mentioned the, I've still got the ASB slides up there on mine. This is just for sort of information around the Rural Task Force and the work. So I know that it's quite a busy slide, and that's available for the public. But again, we've been able to maintain our activity within our rural areas. Rural Task Force has been got a number of operations in place, and you know, we've been able to continue that throughout the COVID period. Okay, moving on to, I know that you wanted to talk, mentioned about our force control room and calls in. So if we can move to the 999, as it, you know, that we've seen a continual increase, not just within North Yorkshire but nationally, with 999s. Again, we saw a significant decrease of nearly 26% throughout April and May. It's more than that, nearly 39% decrease in calls in April and May. And that was again replicated if we move to the 101, because we always, you know, kind of look at both of them together to see if there's been a move from 999 to 101s. So if we move to the next slide, and we had again a 16% decrease in crime volume for our 101 calls. We were able to answer them quickly as well, and more quickly with that. So what we have seen more recently is call duration has increased slightly. Again, that might be because many of the calls that we had during this period were COVID related and questions within that. So there's again sort of several factors that might have changed the actual length of the call that's been taken. So I've got any questions in relation to that?
Yeah, I do. And so call volumes are down, but average speed of answers up. Is that because we've managed the control room differently because of social distancing and the like, and there's just less people available to take calls?
Yeah. So again, very early on, we had to make sure that we maintained the resilience of our workforce, but particularly in our control centre. obvious reasons. We had to manage the social distancing within there, and as you know, a lot of it is in close contact. So we have been operating out of two different sites. Again, so if there was some people came down with COVID, it wouldn't affect one team within that. So again, there was a number of factors in there, but in terms of particularly for the 101, we had seen an improvement in March and April. So if you have a look at that, you know, sort of the purple line, we're around about 155 to 2 minutes, which again we won answer, you know, much more quickly in all cases. But we thought that was actually really good performance to be able to still do that during this period.
Okay, Will, is that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so so I think that finally just takes us to the final stage. But again, that gives final screen, which just gives a summary of everything that we've just spoken about.
Should we just pretend that it's normal?
Yeah.
And we've seen a performance improvement of minus 113%.
I know. It's been incredible.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, it has, you know, but it does go back to my point about how the public have really supported. They've called us when necessary for the right reasons. We know that we want to encourage making sure that those most vulnerable have been supported throughout that. So we do need to make sure that the right people have been able to get through and felt okay about calling us. But you know, they've really helped throughout this difficult period. And you mentioned before with Sam about empowering communities, and I think this is a testament to how we've worked with our communities and partners.
Yeah, I you know, thank the people of North Yorkshire and the City of York for their support, really. You know, I think we've got a period of difficulty coming up, but it has been, you know, tremendous effort on most people's part.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. People.
Okay. So yeah, moving on to the people. So in terms of our ambition, and with the uplift of 1508, this is police officers, that things have really been kept on track in terms of that. So again, working with the challenges and restrictions of continuing our recruitment, we've been innovative in our approach. We've been able to do things virtually in terms of the interviews and some of the other areas. So we are still on track by March 21 of achieving our police officer uplift. So again, really encouraging to see that we've been able to do that throughout. PCSOs, again, it remains on track around our recruitment. Moving on to the next slide.
Sorry, just Annette, just on that, I just think it's probably worth explaining where the 1508 comes from, and that is a combination of local uplift and national uplift.
Yeah. So we've got local uplift with the local with the increase and some of it around sort of the precept and other areas, but with the operation uplift, that has been an increase of, I think it's about 58 this year. So that has been, you know, sort of significant in terms of that particular national uplift work. So people might have heard it called, the 20,000 across, nationally. We've got 58 increase for, sort of next year. We anticipate that there will be further uplifts over the next 2 years. That is the ambition of that particular plan.
And what do you think that will take us to in the end?
I'm trying to make sure my maths. So we're anticipating hopefully around about the 200 mark. So it's very early days, so I can't, sort of say exactly. There will be an uplift. Or the chief constable's coming in here, who's going to be able to respond to that hopefully a little bit better than me.
Briefly, just to assist, obviously there are 3 tranches in the national 20,000 uplift because it was a 3-year programme. So the funding and numbers have been announced on an annual basis. We carry about 1% of the police officer workforce nationally at the point the baseline was agreed. So therefore 1% of our 20,000 uplift, we would hope to get 200. So in the first year, that's generally the baseline and calculations that were used, what percentage of the national police officers you have, although there are no guarantees that for the next 2 years they will continue to use that formula. So I think we are waiting anxiously the announcement for year 2 and the numbers we will get in North Yorkshire. But I know that there are bids in for year 2 for support for things like National Crime Agency, counter-terrorism, policing resource, etc. So we might not end up with the 200 if they don't use the same formula of 1% across the 3 years. We're hoping for it, but we might not see. I think the maximum we'll get is 200, but we're waiting for that announcement for year 2 as we speak.
Okay, so that's really helpful, Lisa. Thank you. And then I think we had some local increases as well, didn't we? So it looks as if we are well on track to really substantially increase the number of officers over the next, from the last sort of year to the next 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also, again, linked to the work of our target operator model to make sure that we've got the right resources in the right place, particularly to support the police and crime plan and the prevention early intervention strategy.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Okay,
sorry, on that note, I mean, this is an unprecedented opportunity actually to try and really get in ahead of demand, isn't it? Through early intervention and prevention. We're never going to get another opportunity like this again.
Absolutely, and this is why the work of the target operating models is so important. Really understanding our demand, releasing capacity. It is a once in sort of a lifetime to get this opportunity, and it's something that we definitely grasped, and work's going on now. So as you're aware, we already have a good understanding about sort of resources, changes in demand. We know all the time, like with cyber enabled crime, things get more complex. With our annual force management statements, we've already got that to build on. So we feel like we're in a really, really good place to make sure that we've got a fantastic response for the communities.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. We've asked a lot of questions and we've got Fire's presentation to go, so we better move on. I think we're nearly there, aren't we?
Yeah. The next one again is on start. I think the last slide is just worthwhile touching on, and that is in relation to our sickness. It's one of those, again, Commissioner, that we need to look at, that our sickness has reduced significantly over this period. There's more, but there's more work that we're doing to understand why we've had those significant increases. People have been been more working from home. There's been more agile. There's, alluding to the fact that we're washing our hands more has an impact on. So there's lots of, sort of potential factors that's caused that again we're doing under the recovery side of that to understand why less people have reported sick.
I mean, that is completely counterintuitive to what we expected. And in the early days of this pandemic, we were planning for 20% sickness levels, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And they've absolutely just decreased significantly. So we mentioned before, we've just finished a staff survey where over 800 have completed it. We're looking at, sort of any of the national changes to see whether that has, sort of the same decrease has been shown nationally, but more so a much more sort of qualitative piece about understanding what's in that decrease.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think the readout really from this presentation is very interesting data, very early stages. Really need to stand and deep into what's really going on and extract any learning we possibly can that might help us for the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting though.
Very interesting. Yeah. So lots of further updates, I think, on this.
All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you for the team for pulling all that data together. It is appreciated. Does anybody else just have any more questions? No, my inner nerd showed there, didn't it? Looking at all of those. Okay, Andrew, over to your team. Is it John who's going to take us through this?
It is John who's going to take us through the performance. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just share my report. Okay, is that visible? Can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you.
So unlike Annette's report, which reflects very much the situation through COVID, this doesn't. So this report covers the last 12 months up to the end of March 2020. So I guess there's a few weeks worth of COVID within there, but not nothing which really affects our performance side of things. But when we move forward from reporting from April onwards, then some of the things that Annette's just pointed out there are very similar with our own performance reporting internally within the fire. So I'll go through the report. There we go.
John, can you do sort of exceptions? Because again, this is a long report.
Yeah, I will. I'll try and just cover. I won't go through every slide in detail. I'll just cover the various bits. So overall, compared to last year, incidents have increased slightly. 158 more last year than we had the year previously. And it reflects a 2.5% increase. Interestingly, our fires are down by 254 on the previous year, but false alarms have gone up slightly, and so there's a balance there to be had as to understand why. False alarms, that's a piece of work we need to, it's not a huge change, but it has gone up, and that's something that we really need to dig into now. We are refreshing our policy on how we deal with false alarms, and certainly some of the things we've talked about earlier with intent-based leadership. Crew and watch managers now that respond to these incidents are now empowered to take action whilst at the scene, rather than coming back and passing it on to others. So that's something we'll keep a close eye on going forward.
But John, if you look at the numbers there, that it's the false alarms that pretty much account for all of that increase.
They do account for some of that increase, but then special service calls also account for a large proportion of the increase as well. So if I show you on the next page, when we come on to there, so you'll notice also there's special service calls have gone up as well, whereas fires have dropped. So special service calls have gone up from 17 152 in 2018-19 up to 210 in 2,110 in the last 12 months. So that's a change there as well that's happened.
Sorry, where's that?
So the grey, if you look at the grey column there on the previous year, so this is special service calls.
Okay.
So that contributes to the overall increase in calls as well.
Okay, right.
But the false alarms, when you compare the last 3 years, they've gone up each year on year. So that's something we're going to have to dig into.
Yeah.
John, can I just come in on that quickly?
Yeah,
Sorry,
sure, yeah.
Just because of that, that obviously the false alarms is something that you're working on. Things like flooding are only likely to continue to increase as we go forwards, and we've seen some really serious floods in the last year, and the weather patterns that are being predicted at the moment are suggesting that that's likely to continue. Are there other preparations that the service is making in regards to flooding and the way that we deal with flooding in response to that, given the significant increase in flooding incidents that you've had to respond to over the last 12 months?
Yeah, so when we start, we are, as we're all aware, we are now developing our risk and resource model, and that will take account of the climate conditions. So flooding is one issue that we've got to contend with. We've had recent strong winds, but then also we've had a real period of drought conditions. Fortunately, in North Yorkshire, we didn't get the wildfires that some of our neighbouring fire and rescue services did. That all needs to be taken account of when we start factoring in how we structure and equip ourselves going forward. So we need to make sure that we're factoring in that we've got the right equipment, the right training in place to be able to deal with adverse weather conditions, be it flood, wind, or the other extremes of drought. And that's something that we're very much sighted on, working out the risk associated with these things.
So can I just also ask, because the narrative nationally is that calls for service in the fire and rescue service are reducing, and that's the sort of mantra that you hear, but clearly that's not the case in North Yorkshire.
And it's not the case now across the UK. That it's recognised now that it's more or less plateaued. So other fire and rescue services are similar to us in that instance, are incrementally now starting to increase again. We did go through a big period of the last 10, 15 years where calls reduced by about anywhere between up to 30%. But of course now that picture's changed and it's now plateaued and is steadily on the increase.
Okay, so it's interesting because I don't think that narrative is widespread at a national level yet. So it's good to draw that out, because I think we need to start challenging that whenever we hear it.
Yes, yeah, we do, and particularly when it comes to funding, etc. Yeah,
exactly.
And I think it's important there that it's not the fires which are driving that, albeit automatic. It's the trend in automatic fire alarms is a different one.
Well, that's why we've got to deal with the fire alarms, isn't it? Because it's inefficient.
It is, yeah, that absolutely. The weather conditions we can't change, but we can change the way we prepare and deal with those incidents, though. So if I come on to the next one, which sort of expands a little bit on what we've just talked of there. Again, the left-hand column here is where we've got the types of incident we're dealing with, and within the other. This is where we've seen a different style of increase as well. So when I'm hoping you can see my cursor there, but where we talk about special service calls and assisting ambulance and assisting other agencies, quite a significant increase there compared to last year. And certainly in the last 3 years, that's gone up quite significantly. And what that is where we're now going out and forcing an entry into a building for particularly the ambulance service, but we're doing it also alongside other emergency service colleagues. Support to go and assist with bariatric patients is on the increase. Support to go and deal with some mental health issues is certainly on the increase as well. So that's another new area of work that is sadly increasing due to a range of different circumstances there. But again, the fire situation, particularly with the secondary fires in the outdoors, that did decrease last year. I suspect this next year it will have gone up because we had the very, very dry period and the COVID associated issues with the tips being closed, etc.
Yes, I think that's it. That's an important point. We when we do the next reporting cycle, we'll need to just sort of isolate out COVID, because it will skew all the figures, won't it?
It certainly will, yeah. So I'll move on to the next one, and again, this just sort of shows the area where secondary fires in 1819. When you look at 1718 and then 1920, in 1819 we had an increase, but it's back down to where it was the previous year. I think that will be way off the scale again next year, though, due to the COVID and the weather. Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide, which is this is again a much good news story, really. So it shows how things are settling down. So it shows how our whole-time colleagues, particularly in the operational staff, are now getting further empowered and further developed to be able to go out and deliver some of the local initiatives. So Safe and Well in particular, compared to previous years, is steadily improving and steadily increasing by the operational crews. The orange is where the station-based staff are delivering, and the blue is where the community safety staff are delivering. Community safety staff, they really concentrate on the highly vulnerable. The station staff still deliver the Safe and Well, but deal with some of the slightly lower vulnerability issues. But nonetheless, it sort of demonstrates there that the training is taking effect and people are becoming a little bit more confident to go out there and deliver these Safe and Wells. And we'll only build on that. So the next phases of that are then to start and train the on-call staff and our volunteer staff so that they can also go and deliver Safe and Well, which is, you know, it's a real improvement, and it's a real it's the area that we've really got to focus in on, is the vulnerable within our society and what we can actually do for them.
That's really good to see. That's really good to see.
And similarly with the fire safety audits, again, you know, big increase from 1819 in that the station-based staff there are delivering far more than they did the previous year. And then the fire safety outcomes, fire safety outcomes there, we're seeing more satisfactory, but also we're seeing more with the unsatisfactory in terms of the outcomes that we find. But nonetheless, the message going out there is such that we've had less prosecutions of late as well, which is good. Okay, when it comes on to appliance availability, this hasn't been a good picture, and there's a number of things here which we've talked about earlier in terms of the on-call side of things. Good news is that we've put 24 brand new whole-time recruits into the equation now. So over the last 12 months within this reporting period, we were carrying a lot of whole-time vacancies, and at that time the only way we could support those vacancies was to put fixed-term contracts in from the on-call, which is almost robbing Peter to pay Paul. Now we've got beyond that, and we talked earlier about how we will be able to. We've got a whole-time recruits process going on at the moment, and we've also approved and agreed now that we will also look at opportunities to transfer into the service where we get unexpected leavers. So that's a change in policy, which I'm hoping will improve the situation overall going forward. But nonetheless, year on year, there's been a decline in our overall availability, and that's largely the on-call side of things, which has caused us a problem.
So again, I mean, I do think there's quite a lot of learning out of COVID to be had on this. I mean, it tells us a lot about the nature of our work, of our on-call workforce.
It certainly does, and so we've now got the On-Call Futures programme, which is making good progress now. So we're in the research phases with that, but three trends that are emerging from it are pay needs to be adjusted, the levels of commitment we need to try and address and make some flexibilities within there, and we need to also make sure that the training element of it is made as flexible as we can to accommodate the on-call side of things. we're analysing as well the reasons why people are leaving, and a lot of people are leaving due to primary employment reasons, moving out of the response area, but pay also comes into it. So the On-Call Futures project will certainly attempt to address these issues, and we're looking also up and down the country and seeing where best practices being developed so that we can have a look at that as well.
So, John, may there be a risk around the? I mean, I think we're going. I mean, I just noticed that. I mean, I know it doesn't affect us, but you know, EasyJet's just closing 3 of its sites down. I mean, the employment market looks as if it might change significantly because of COVID. On the one hand, that might make, you know, the relatively modest amount of money that people get from being an on-call firefighter more important. But on the other hand, it might mean people have got far more job volatility, and that means that they may have to take jobs which are incompatible with being an on-call firefighter. Have you done any sort of surveys with the on-call workforce to sort of understand any risks around that?
Yeah, that piece of work is currently in progress at the moment, and similar to the police, we're about to put out a survey to all staff actually as to the effects of the COVID crisis. But yeah, I mean, there are bound to be some casualties within this, but also there may be opportunities as well, because we've had, over the COVID crisis, we were expecting, similar to police colleagues, reductions in overall staff, when actually our on-call availability went very, very high. At one point, it was 99%. It was wonderful. If only we could keep it that way. But there are people as well who have now become familiar with working at home, and similar to ourselves, will be continuing to do that more so in the future. That can play positively to the on-call side of things. People's lifestyles have changed, and obviously the employment is so volatile and uncertain at the moment for some of these people. We just don't know what the final outcome will be with this. But you know, we've got to look positive, and we'll look for the opportunities within there as well to make sure that we can accommodate new working practices within our new model as we develop it.
Yeah, I just think it's also we do need to look positive, but we also do need to have our eyes open for any risks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, that piece of work is ongoing. On-call recruitment it remains, as we stand at the moment, still very, very volatile, very difficult. Having said that, we have had some good successes, and we've learned from some of the engagement we did locally within the community at Massam late last year, whereby we had some public meetings in association with the TRBs, and that has worked well. So we've now got a number of people stepping forward to become on-call firefighters, and local employers have engaged and now willing to release staff. So we've not actually managed to recruit them yet, but we've got people waiting in the wings to come on to courses when we can put them on. So that's a positive, and we need to learn about that and try and utilise that approach elsewhere. So that's certainly something we will be looking at. We've got an on-call.
Is that a strategy to put TRVs in on-call fire stations then?
We should try it furthermore. Yes, let's pick on a few different stations. Yeah, but no, it's an approach that's certainly made people think about this, and certainly local employers. So we need to try and adopt that elsewhere. But we are now meeting every other month to really closely monitor our on-call. We've got 100 people, approximately 100, waiting to join the on-call. Sadly, we had to cancel a course which should have been running in July due to COVID, but we're looking at putting 2 further courses on at the back end of the year. So I'm positive that we can increase, but of course, until we get to the other end of the On-Call Futures project, some of the benefits will take a number of, potentially a couple of years or more to really appreciate. Okay, shall we move on to our sickness absence levels? And again, a good picture all around, apart from long-term sickness within the on-call, but all others are all down on the previous year. So the short-term and long-term for whole time is down compared to the same period last year, and the short-term within the on-call is down compared to the same period last year. So really good there. And of course, this isn't reflective of the COVID situation. This is the year previous. And then finally, we did touch on this earlier about our overall staffing profile and the diversity challenges that we now face. But within here, you will notice there that the whole-time firefighters, we've got more this year than we had last year, and albeit they only landed on station in April, they were employed by the service from January going forward with their training. And of course, so we're slightly over-established at the moment within our whole-time capacity, but by September, that sort of level pegs out and plateaus when we've got retirements coming on. And then we've, of course, got the recruitment process now going on for a new batch of whole-time firefighters for next year.
Okay.
So I'll stop there and take any questions if there are any.
Anybody got it? Tom, have you got anything?
No, thanks.
No. And Will?
Nothing from me.
No.
Thank you.
That's good. That's really helpful. I know we've got a discussion about what we do at following on themes and stuff for the next few meetings. So let's have a discussion on those. It'd be interesting to see some of the impact of COVID on the fire and rescue service. And it'd be interesting to see the learnings that you're taking back to for a bit further on. You might have a bit more thinking done on that. I'm now just going to go to the questions from the public that we should have done at the beginning when my broadband was playing up. So I think we've divided it up into themes rather than individual questions because we've had a few. But we will get back to people with answers to their queries. So if you've sent us something, we will get back to you. So in terms of the themes, we've had quite a lot of questions around antisocial behaviour and how the police are going to deal with that. And I think that's probably closely related to concerns around the relaxation of lockdown and some of the visitors that we've had who've been displaying antisocial behaviour and some of the pretty distressing scenes that we've seen in the way that some people have treated our area. So there's that. There's also speeding, so quite a lot of concerns around speeding in villages, but also in the city of York, and issues related to things like sort of noise of motorcycles and those sort of things. And we have covered 101. So that's that. And then Lisa, if you could just provide an overview of the plans for Super Saturday, as it has been dubbed. I'm hoping that PC Rain is on patrol, but we will have to wait and see what the weather forecast is like. So, Lisa, do you want to pick up on those?
Yes, will do, thank you. So covering the theme of antisocial behaviour, at the start of COVID, we did see a massive reduction in antisocial behaviour because everybody in the first couple of weeks was locked down, staying at home, children not at school. We saw a few occasions of people where their children were out and about, but that soon was remedied. As the restrictions have been lifted, we have seen a considerable increase in the number of calls about antisocial behaviour, not only the sort of antisocial behaviour that you've mentioned there, Julia, in respect of people visiting beauty spots, being loud, noisy, playing music, being inconsiderate to the people who live in those beauty spots, leaving rubbish behind, urinating and defecating in some of those beauty spots. And so not only that antisocial behaviour, but a lot of calls about children grouping together. So I really appreciate the children are off school. I appreciate it's very difficult for parents of those children to just lock them indoors all of the time. Some homeschooling is going on, but some is not. and therefore we're getting calls about children out in large groups. They congregate together, they congregate in areas where they like to go and be together, and we will respond to those calls for antisocial behaviour. And we've been out to numerous incidents. We've taken children home to their parents. We've tried to use communications and social media to try and encourage parents of those children. Do you know where your children are? And the risks to your family. If the infection is spread from a COVID perspective, we appreciate that the impact on children appears to be less so from the COVID infection, but actually taking that infection back home to your grandparents, parents, and those who are more vulnerable from catching that infection. So the plea has very much been, where are your children and what are they doing and who are they mixing with? And some social responsibility, and really ask people to take this seriously in terms of congregating children. But we are out and about speaking with those groups of children and taking people back home and trying to encourage them to look after where their children are and their best interests. In terms of the antisocial behaviour of adults turning up at beauty spots, again, we've had policing operations running linked to COVID. We have issued enforcement where there have been groups of people that are large and shouldn't have been together. And of course, we're looking at the opportunities to use more traditional legislation under the Public Order Act to deal with those groups of people who are not behaving in a way that would be socially responsible to those people in those areas. I know we've had a couple of specific queries today from Filey about antisocial behaviour. Your local policing team are aware of your concerns. We have noted the reports linked to that, some drugs antisocial behaviour in Filey. So please be assured you will get a response from us to those that have written in from Filey, and your local team are aware of it and on with it in terms of that. But we would encourage you to report everything, because I think when we've looked at the stats, there aren't as many reports as we would have imagined, because people are talking about it in those towns and villages themselves, but not actually picking the phone up. And policing operates on information and intelligence. It's our lifeblood, and if we don't have the information and intelligence that there is a hotspot in an area, we might not allocate resources, or your local team might not know that those things are going on. So please, I would encourage you to report it so that we've got a realistic picture of what's taking place in your local communities. In terms of speeding, yes, we've had a lot of contact right from the very start of COVID about people being upset about the safety camera vans being out at the start of COVID. We've actually seen a swing of public contact to people who actually want to see the safety camera vans because of the inappropriate antisocial use of the roads by some of our motorists. It was raised a little bit earlier in this meeting about the risk that people have been at from speeding motorists on our roads. But now you're right, Julia, there's been a lot more of a local flavour to people being worried about speeding motorists in 30 mile an hour, 20 mile an hour zones. So a couple of specific queries we've had today. In those particular areas, we have had data loggers out in some of those areas. Again, we will get back to those individuals that have contacted us when the data loggers, which I think are put out by the Fire and Rescue Service, Andrew, I think I'm right in saying that, and in 30 mile an hour speed limits, we've had data logs of speeds of 23, 24 miles an hour, which is why in those communities there has been no further enforcement activity taking place, because the data logger is not backing up some of the perceptions or concerns that have been reported. So if there are continued behavioural concerns, please keep reporting it to us, because we can put data loggers out again. And I know there is one where there was a data logger out in January, I think linked to a query from Sutton. And we are going to put them out again in June, because since January, which were low speed rates that were detected, there's been further concerns raised, so we will put those out. I think you also raised on a previous PAM, Julia, about Community Speed Watch. We are looking at getting that back up and running again in a COVID safe way, so that neighbourhood policing teams can support local communities in tackling some of these local issues. I will move now on to the Saturday plans. So we are anticipating both in villages and towns where maybe some public houses are opening, but also in some of our more built up areas, that some of our pubs and restaurants will open, some won't. We're trying to gather intelligence and information about the numbers of premises that are opening, but we have a full policing operation running at the weekend on every command. We're linking in with local communities. We're linking in with partners in the licensing authorities, in local authorities, to try and make the easing of the lockdown as safe as possible for those people who do want to go out and enjoy the fact that our pubs and restaurants are open. My urge would be, please act responsibly. There are people who live in these places and they too want to have the freedom of enjoyment of going out and not being at risk from their health. So I think the national message has been, yes, please go out and enjoy the fact that there is a little bit more liberty, that you can enjoy pubs and restaurants and support the local economy, but do so sensibly. We've seen in some built up areas when the weather's been nice the past couple of weekends, people out drinking to excess, being very loud, leaving their rubbish bottles, things they've bought from the supermarket, laying around, and others, volunteers and the local authorities have kindly gone out and collected all of this rubbish and tidied up after people. Please take your bin bag and take your rubbish home with you, and act responsibly. So I would just plea, the police will be out this weekend in force. We will look at using legislation to do with dispersal. We will look at alcohol related legislation, including the COVID legislation, to ensure people are acting responsibly and they don't spoil the environment for those who do want to go out and peaceably enjoy a little bit more of the relaxation of the regulations.
Lisa, can I just raise one thing in particular that seems to have cropped up quite a lot, and that is NOS gas and the little canisters that people are finding everywhere. Can you just explain what the situation is regards to that?
So we've seen what we believe is quite a lot of young people using the little silver gas canisters. They're being found in a lot of fields. I know there's been things on social media. I would have to defer to somebody who knows better than I where they're getting it from. It's very dangerous.
The catering industry, I think it's for whipping cream.
And it's extremely dangerous, and we're trying to get those social messages out there to people. Please do not use these substances. We don't really know the impact that they can have on people's health. You don't know whether there are other underlying issues if people particularly have been drinking or taking drugs and then taking substances. And we think it's groups of young people, and we're finding hundreds of canisters strewn. It's a danger to other people using those areas. I would really urge people, if you think your children are obtaining these canisters, please keep your eyes peeled and try and stop the risk to some of our young people that could be caused by the use of these canisters.
And I do also worry, because a lot of them are turning up in the countryside, and one worries about the impact on wildlife and cattle and that type of stuff as well, because it's just nasty litter as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Have we covered all of the questions? And I think we have, haven't we? In themes.
Yeah. The only other was 101, I think, but that we covered that in the presentation.
Yeah, we did.
But we will get back to individual. People have emailed us. We've got your addresses. We can get back to you individually in terms of the very specific queries some people have made to us, so that your local policing teams can link in with you, and we can glean some of that further information that you've offered about some of your concerns.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the thing about Filey was alleged drug dealing as well, so not just antisocial behaviour, but a wider issue there, but not necessarily something we can go into now. But
yeah, okay, fantastic. All right, that is great. So I've just got one question, and I'm thinking about the efficiency and effectiveness of this meeting. Given that we're on Teams, it strikes me that we can all just dial in at the relevant points now, rather than all sitting here in a room together. So let's look at how we sort of choreograph that next time around, so that it's a little bit more nimble for people. So we'll look at that as well. Okay. All right. Anything else that anybody would like to add or make comments on? No, I'd like to thank everybody then for all the work for the presentations, both in giving them, but also in preparing them. So thank you very much. Thank you.